Figure it out yourself. That's what my wife, Claire, shouted before hitting the gas and leaving me standing in a gas station parking lot in Billings, Montana, 200 miles away from home in Denver. I watched as her sisters, Lauren and Brooke, burst into laughter in the back seat, as though it were the funniest thing they'd ever witnessed. My name's Ethan. I'm 34. I work construction for North Peak Engineering, and I'd been married to Claire for 8 years. We had driven up for her cousin's wedding, a simple weekend trip that was supposed to be a small escape, just the four of us sharing gas money and hotel costs. But the entire drive felt wrong. Claire kept exchanging glances with her sisters through the rearview mirror, whispering things when they thought I couldn't hear. When I asked what they were talking about, she'd smile that easy smile and say, "Nothing, babe, just sister stuff." I should have listened to my instincts. An hour before Billings, we stopped for gas. I went inside to grab coffee and use the restroom, and when I came back, they were already in the car with the engine running. Claire rolled down the window, her expression oddly amused. "Get in the car, Claire," I said, walking toward the passenger door. "Actually," she said, "we've been talking, and we think you need to learn some independence." "What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. Lauren leaned forward from the back seat, her voice sharp. "You're always following her around like a lost puppy. We figured this would be good for you." Brooke added with a smirk, "Yeah, a little adventure." I stared down at the keys in my hand, not car keys, but our house keys. My truck was still back home in Denver, parked in our driveway. "This isn't funny," I said. "Whatever this is, cut it out." Claire's grin only widened. "It's not a joke, it's a prank. You're always so serious, Ethan. Try laughing a little." And with that, she shouted, "Figure it out yourself," and slammed her foot on the gas. I watched their taillights vanish into the distance along Highway 2, standing there with nothing but my wallet, my phone, and a cold wave of realization that my wife and her sisters had just abandoned me in the middle of nowhere. The October wind tore through my jacket, carrying the scent of incoming snow. I called Claire voicemail. I tried Lauren, same thing. Brooke had blocked me months earlier after an argument I could barely remember. That's when I knew this wasn't just a prank that would blow over in an hour. It was something else, something that showed me exactly what they thought of me. I walked back inside and asked the gas station clerk about a bus ticket to Denver. He shrugged. "No buses run through here," he said. "Greyhound stops in Billings, though, about 40 miles east." 9 years earlier, I'd met Claire at a job site. She was doing environmental consulting for a project my crew was working on, smart, funny, and with this way of making me feel like I was the only person that mattered. Her sisters were nothing like her. Lauren, 2 years older, worked in marketing and always had an opinion ready. Brooke, 28, was still figuring out her life but full of attitude. From the start, they treated me like I was stealing their sister. Family dinners were filled with inside jokes I couldn't follow. On vacations, they'd plan activities without even asking if I wanted to join. When I brought it up, Claire would say, "They're just protective. They'll warm up to you." But they never did. After our marriage, things got worse. Lauren began implying that I held Claire back from adventure. Brooke rolled her eyes every time I offered to help, with a tire, with something broken, and she'd mutter, "Not everything needs a man to fix it." I started noticing how often Claire was glued to her phone, always texting her sisters. She'd cancel our plans because one of them had a sudden crisis. She once forgot our anniversary because she was helping Brooke move. The year before, she missed my birthday dinner because Lauren was having relationship issues. "Family comes first," she'd tell me, and I agreed, but I thought I was part of that family too. Looking back, the warnings had been clear on the way to Montana. They insisted I leave my truck at home so we could all ride together. Claire booked the hotel under her name only. Lauren joked that I never did anything spontaneous. Brooke teased, "Remember when you used to be fun? Before you got all boring and domestic?" I laughed along, but it stung. I worked 60-hour weeks to keep our life steady. Fixing things, planning trips, remembering dates. I thought that was what being a good husband meant. Standing in that parking lot, watching the sunset fall over the Montana hills, I realized I'd been wrong. Not about being a good husband, but about who I was married to. The clerk let me use the landline to call a taxi to Billings. A $60 ride I could barely afford, but I had no choice. The bus to Denver took 14 long hours, giving me plenty of time to think about my marriage and the woman I'd spent 8 years trying to make happy. I kept checking my phone, waiting for an apology, a message, anything. But nothing came. Around midnight, somewhere outside Casper, Wyoming, the truth finally hit me. This wasn't about teaching me independence or helping me grow. It was about humiliation, a cruel game meant to remind me exactly where I stood in their world. And as the dark planes rushed past outside the window, I realized I had spent years giving in to people who never once saw me as part of their family at all. All the times I had swallowed my words when they made jokes at my expense came flooding back. Every moment I'd apologized for things that weren't my fault just to keep the peace. But the worst part wasn't being left behind. It was realizing that this entire thing had probably been planned for weeks, maybe months, hatched during one of their little gatherings at Lauren's apartment. I could almost picture them laughing over drinks, trading ideas about how long it would take me to figure out how to get home. When the bus finally rolled into Denver around 8 o'clock that morning, I had already made my decision. I took a cab straight home, expecting to see Claire's car in the driveway, but it wasn't there. The house was exactly as we'd left it that Friday morning. Neat, quiet, and empty. I sat at the kitchen table, called in sick to work, and for the first time in my life, I did something I'd never imagined myself doing. I went through my wife's things. It wasn't out of jealousy or spite. I needed to understand who I'd actually been married to. Her laptop was password protected, but she'd never been good at closing her tabs. That was where I found it. Group chats between her and her sisters that stretched back for months. Screenshots of our text messages that she had shared with them, complete with laughing emojis. Photos of me asleep, captioned things like, "Dead to the world, as usual," and "Zero awareness." Then I found the conversation about the Montana trip, and something inside me cracked. Lauren had been the one to suggest it. We should totally ditch him somewhere and see how long it takes him to figure out how to get home. Brooke had replied, "OMG yes. He's so dependent on Steph for everything." And Claire's response, "You guys are terrible, but also, it would be hilarious." They had planned every single detail. The gas station stop, the line about learning independence, even a backup plan if I somehow made it home before they did. Lauren had joked, "He'll probably just call his mom. Big baby." I shut the laptop and sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. Then I went upstairs, packed a bag, and left. I didn't lock the door. I didn't leave a note. I simply walked out, the same way they had driven away from me, except this time I wasn't coming back. I drove my truck to my brother Ryan's apartment in Colorado Springs. He worked nights at a manufacturing plant and had a spare room. When he opened the door and saw me standing there with a duffel bag, he didn't ask questions. He just handed me a beer. "How long you staying?" he asked. "Don't know yet," I said. Ryan had never liked Claire. He'd never said it directly, but I'd seen it in the way he'd go quiet when she was around, or how he'd always leave family gatherings early when she attended. That night, I told him everything, the prank, the messages, the months of planning behind my back. "Jesus, Ethan," he said when I finished. "You're better off without her." By Monday morning, I'd called my supervisor at North Peak and asked for a transfer to a project in Colorado Springs. We were shorthanded on a hospital renovation, and they needed experienced workers. My boss didn't ask why, just told me to start Wednesday. Tuesday afternoon, my phone began to ring. Claire was back. I ignored the first few calls, then listened to one of her voicemails. "Ethan, where are you? I came home and you're just gone. That's not like you. Call me back, we need to talk about this." No apology. No acknowledgement of what she had done. Just disbelief that I'd had the nerve to disappear on her. I blocked her number. Then Lauren called. I blocked her too. Brooke followed and she got the same. But they didn't stop. They started using new numbers, work phones, unknown lines. Always the same message. That I was overreacting, that it was just a harmless joke, that I needed to come home so we could talk things out. By Thursday night, Ryan came home from work with a strange look on his face. "Your wife's here," he said quietly. "She's sitting in her car outside." I looked out the window. There was Claire's sedan, parked across the street. When she saw me, she got out and started walking toward the building. I met her in the lobby before she could knock on Ryan's door. "Ethan, thank God," she said, reaching for me. "I've been so worried." I stepped back. "What do you want, Claire?" "I want you to come home," she said. "We need to talk about this like adults." "Talk about what?" "How you left me 200 miles from home. How you and your sisters planned it for months." For a split second, her expression shifted. The worried wife mask slipped, replaced by irritation. "It was a prank, Ethan. You're acting like we committed a crime." "You left me stranded," I said. "You laughed about it. You planned it for months." "Because you needed it?" she shot back. "You're so dependent, so clingy. We thought if you had to figure something out on your own, maybe you'd grow up a little." The lobby was silent except for the low hum of the fluorescent lights. I looked at the woman I had spent 8 years married to and realized I didn't know her at all. "I'm not coming home," I said. "Don't be ridiculous. You can't just walk away because your feelings got hurt. Watch me." I turned toward the elevator. She followed, talking faster now. Excuses, promises, even threats, but I stopped listening. When the elevator doors closed, she was still talking. By Friday morning, a text came through from an unknown number. "This is Lauren. Claire's really upset. You need to fix this." I showed it to Ryan over coffee. He just said, "Change your number." So I did. 3 weeks later, I'd started to settle into my new life. Working days on the hospital project, helping Ryan with his truck on weekends, learning how to make decisions without asking anyone first. I found a small apartment on the south side of Colorado Springs. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. No debates about furniture, no compromises about dinner, no one to check in with. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Then my mother called. "Ethan, honey?" she began, her voice soft and anxious. "Claire came by the house." I'd been avoiding my parents' calls, not ready to explain everything. But apparently, Claire hadn't hesitated to tell her side. "What did she say?" I asked. "She said you're having some kind of breakdown," my mother replied. "That you disappeared after a family trip and won't answer her calls." I could hear the concern in her voice. Mom had always liked Claire. Thought she was responsible, grounded, good for me. "It's not a breakdown, Mom," I said quietly. "We're just having problems." "What kind of problems could we possibly have that couldn't be worked out?" my mother asked, but I didn't want to explain. I didn't want to talk about the messages, the planning, or the quiet cruelty that had led to that moment in Montana. To anyone else, it would sound petty, like I'd overreacted to a simple prank. "I'll call you later, Mom," I said. "I just need time to think." But after hanging up, I realized Claire was still pulling the strings, still twisting the story to make me look like the unstable husband who'd walked out over nothing. She was rewriting the truth, one phone call at a time. That weekend, I drove back to Denver, not to our house, but to my friend Derek's place. He worked construction too and had been at my wedding. When he opened the door, he gave me a sympathetic look. "Heard you and Claire split up," he said. "Sorry, man." "What did you hear?" I asked. "Just that you took off after a fight." She seemed pretty torn up about it. There it was again. Claire's version of events, the one where I was the bad guy who'd lost his temper and abandoned her. Derek handed me a beer, and we sat on his back porch while I told him the real story from start to finish. When I was done, he shook his head. "That's messed up," he said quietly. "Why would she do that?" "I think she wanted control," I said. "Not to leave me permanently, but to prove she could. To show me I didn't matter." Derek was quiet for a while, then said, You know what I remember about your wedding? I shook my head. During the reception, you were talking to some of my crew guys. Just casual talk. But every time you laughed, she came over and interrupted. Said you needed to go take photos or talk to someone else. I thought back to that day, to how she'd kept pulling me away from conversations. At the time, I thought she was just being a good hostess. Now I saw it differently. Maybe she didn't like seeing me happy without her, I said. That night, I drove past our old house. Her car was parked in the driveway, the living room lights glowing. I could see her shadow moving behind the curtains. I didn't stop. I just kept driving. Seeing that house, remembering what it had been, I realized something important. I wasn't just escaping a bad marriage. I was heading towards something better. Over the next few months, I started taking steps I should have taken long ago. I opened my own bank account, transferred my share of our savings, and hired a lawyer who specialized in divorce, Megan Holt. She listened carefully as I explained everything. Do you have documentation of the harassment? She asked. I showed her the block numbers, the messages from Lauren and Brooke, and the call logs showing how they tried reaching me at work. And she went to your parents' house? Megan asked. Yeah, I said. Told them I was having a breakdown. Megan made a few notes. We can work with this. Colorado is a no-fault state, but harassment like this can still be useful. I signed the papers that same afternoon. Megan would handle serving Claire and start the process. As I got up to leave, she said one more thing. Don't engage. Don't respond to texts, calls, or visits. Anything you say can be used to make you look unstable or vindictive. What if she shows up at my job? I asked. Document it, she said firmly. Call the police if needed, but do not engage. Meanwhile, the hospital renovation project in Colorado Springs was going well. I'd been promoted to crew leader, managing 5 workers. The job was steady, the pay was good, and no one cared about my personal life as long as I did my work. I even enrolled in evening business management classes at the community college. Something I'd always wanted to do but never had the freedom for when Claire and her sisters filled every minute of my time. For the first time in years, I had room to breathe, to think, to figure out what I wanted instead of constantly reacting to others. 2 months after filing for divorce, Ryan called me at work. That lawyer of yours wants to talk, he said. Says it's important. I met Megan that afternoon. She had a stack of papers on her desk and a satisfied look on her face. Your wife's been busy, she said. She hired her own attorney and is claiming abandonment. Says you left without warning and refused to participate in counseling. Abandonment, I repeated. It's a weak argument, Megan said. But they're trying to make your leaving sound deliberate and spiteful. They want to fight the division of assets. A cold heaviness settled in my stomach. Even after everything, Claire was still trying to twist the story. But here's the interesting part, Megan continued. We had an investigator do some digging. Your wife's been telling people you were abusive, that she left for her safety. That's a lie, I said immediately. I know, Megan replied. And I can prove it. She slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printed screenshots, social media posts from that same weekend. Claire and her sisters at a bar in Billings, holding shot glasses, grinning for selfies. Captions read Girls' Weekend and Freedom. Megan pointed at the timestamps. Posted at 11 that night, the same day they left you at that gas station. This completely destroys their story. They can't claim fear while they're out celebrating. I stared at the photos, my heart pounding. In one of them, Lauren was wearing my Denver Broncos cap, the one I'd left in the car when I went into the store. There's more, Megan said. She handed me another set of documents, screenshots from the group chats. Your wife didn't bother securing her privacy settings. The investigator pulled these directly. They were the same conversations I'd seen on her laptop, plus dozens I hadn't. Months of planning, mocking me, betting on how long it would take me to crawl home. We file our response tomorrow, Megan said. Then we end this. The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March. I wore the same suit I'd been married in 8 years earlier, a reminder of everything that had started so differently from how it ended. Claire sat across the courtroom at another table beside her attorney, a polished man in an expensive suit who looked like every minute of his time came with a price tag. She'd lost some weight and looked worn down. When our eyes met across the room, she tried to smile, as if there was still some connection between us, as if we were still on the same side. Her attorney went first. He spoke with practiced confidence, painting me as an unstable husband who had overreacted to a harmless joke. According to him, I had abandoned my wife after a minor disagreement, refused counseling, and disappeared without explanation. "Your Honor," he said. Mr. Ethan Mercer was clearly looking for a way out of his marriage. He used a trivial misunderstanding between family members as an excuse to abandon his responsibilities. When it was our turn, Megan rose from her seat. Calm, composed, lethal. "Your Honor," she began evenly, "we would like to present evidence that directly contradicts the petitioner's claims." She handed the judge a neatly organized binder of screenshots, social media posts, and documented harassment. One by one, she dismantled Claire's carefully built narrative. "These are text messages between the petitioner and her sisters," Megan continued, showing that what they referred to as a prank was, in fact, planned over several months. "Here are social media posts from the same night my client was abandoned, posts celebrating their actions. And here are records showing repeated contact attempts and harassment, despite my client's explicit request for no communication." The judge read silently, flipping through the pages. Claire's attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently, but I could see the panic forming behind her controlled expression. "Furthermore," Megan added, her tone measured, "the petitioner has spread false and damaging claims about my client's mental health and character to mutual friends and family. This demonstrates a sustained pattern of manipulation and emotional abuse, not concern or misunderstanding." When the judge finally looked up, his expression was firm. "Based on the evidence presented," he said, "I'm granting the divorce as requested. Assets will be divided equally, and no spousal support will be awarded to either party. The court finds no evidence of abandonment or abuse by the respondent." Claire tried to approach me afterward in the hallway, but Megan stepped between us. "No contact," she said firmly. "The order still stands." I walked out of the courthouse and didn't look back. 3 years after that gas station in Montana, it was finally over. The business management courses I'd taken paid off. 6 months later, I started my own company, Mercer Contracting. At first, the jobs were small. Bathroom remodels, deck repairs, garage restorations. But the work was steady, and word spread quickly. Customers appreciated that I showed up on time and kept my promises. Ryan became my first employee. Derek joined soon after. Within a year, we'd built a reputation as contractors who didn't cut corners. I bought a small house on the west side of Colorado Springs. Nothing fancy, but it had a garage for my tools and a quiet yard where I could sit and think. There were no shared decisions, no endless debates over furniture or paint colors. For the first time in a long time, my life felt simple, and mine. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Derek at the hardware store. "You hear about Claire?" he asked. I hadn't thought about her in months. "What about her?" "Divorced again," he said. "Married some guy from her job about 6 months after your divorce. Didn't even last a year." I picked up the box of screws I'd come for and started toward the checkout. "Don't you want to know what happened?" Derek called after me. "Not really," I said, and I meant it. In time, Claire and her sisters faced their own consequences. Lauren lost her marketing job after her involvement in the harassment made her employer legally vulnerable. Brooke's lies about me unraveled when mutual friends compared notes and realized she'd fabricated everything. And Claire's rushed remarriage, followed quickly by another divorce, left her isolated from the same people she'd once tried so hard to impress. Some lessons, I realized, can only be learned the hard way.